Apostle Paul was saying that the grace of God has constrained us. The grace of God has resisted us. The grace of God has kept us away from some of these things. The grace of God is not a license to sin. The grace that we have received is not a license for us to sin, but it's a license for us to live a saving life, a life that is completely free from sin, a life that's completely free from the Adamic nature, a life that's completely free from anything worldly. That is what the grace means. He said, by the grace of Christ has constrained us. Since you have received this grace, since you can confess that we are in the era of grace, what has the grace constrained you from? You have received grace. Did the grace control your lips? Did the grace of God that you have received, did it control your emotions? Did the grace of God that you have received, did it control your self-interest, your personal self-interest? These are things that you must understand. We are in the era of grace does not mean that God no longer punishes sin. Sins are punishable with God. Sins are punishable. God still punishes sin. Its standard remains the same. The only privilege that you have is that because we are in the era of grace, the consequence of what you did may not be instant. There may not be instant judgment of what you have done immediately, because you are in the era of grace. That means that the consequence of it is still coming. Many of us have taken grace for granted. No matter how we may think grace is free, it is not free, because Christ paid the price with his own blood on the cross of Calvary. Beloved, the grace that you thought that is free to us cost God something, cost God a lot. It cost him his only begotten Son. Grace comes with a price. Christ paid the price for us that we might be saved. And if you think you have received grace and because of that you begin to live your life the way you feel, no, you have not received the true grace. He said, for the grace of God that bringeth salvation. The first thing that grace brought is salvation. The first thing that grace brought is the resisting spirit to sin. The first thing that grace brought is being to be deemed dead to the natural nature, the nature of man. It's to be dead to the things of this world. That is what grace means. Grace is not a license to sin, but it's a license to live a life of sobriety and a total freedom from a sinful nature. If you live a life and think you are in the era of grace and you are not sober enough, your life is not pure, your heart is not pure, the words that comes out of your lips are not pure, then you have not received this grace you are talking about. If you truly have received grace, grace will constrain you from sinning. If you truly have received grace, grace will control your mouth, your lips, the conversation. The kind of course that comes out of your mouth will be seasoned with grace and is controlled. Perversing word will no longer come out of your mouth. The grace of God, it gives man the ability to overcome every form of sinful life. The grace of God gives men strength over their weakness. This is what grace does. Grace has covered my weakness. I don't have any weakness anymore. And whatever what I do, this is my weakness. This is how I feel it. What will I do? We are in the era of grace. Grace covers it. Grace came that you will have strength over those weaknesses. Grace has come and has come to teach men that we run away from every sinful life. Look at what verse 12 says. It says, teaching us that denying ungodliness. If you have received grace and there's no point of your life that you are denying any form of godliness, you have not received grace. You are yet to receive the grace you are talking about. If you are still living in sin, you have not yet received grace. Receiving grace means that you are abandoning your sin, leaving the sin behind, and cleaving to the cross. They're teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly loss, when you have received grace, the worldly laws do not have dominion over you anymore. And the scripture was saying that it says sin will no longer have dominion over you because you have received grace. But if you say we are in the era of grace and you are living in sinful life, you have not received that grace. In reality, you have not received that grace. Because when grace comes, it gives you the grace to deny every ungodliness and worldly loss. That we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. That is why grace has come. The purpose why grace was given, the purpose why we have received grace is that we will live a life of sobriety, that we will live a life of righteousness, and we will live a life of godliness. If you say you are a Christian and we are in the era of grace, and you are in the era of grace and you can't live above sin, you can't live a godly life, you have not received the true grace. A man that has received grace and is living in the era of grace is a man that is living a life of sobriety, a life of righteousness, and a life of godliness. These three things must be seen in you. This is what grace came to do for us. This is the reason why grace came. Grace is not a license to sin. Grace is not an opportunity for us to be living the life the way we feel because you are in the era of, because the judgment of God is no longer instant. Does not mean that God is not going to judge sin. He will surely judge sin in every form, no matter how we paint it, no matter how we present it. Beloved, don't be deceived that you are in the era of grace and you are living a sinful life. There's consequence for every sin of man. He said, looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ. What grace does that? It presents us holy. If you are finding it difficult to live an holy life, and you see you are living in the era of grace, there is a need for you to visit Calvary again. Because that the purpose, the primary purpose of God giving us grace, of God releasing His grace upon us, is that we will live a holy life. A life that is pure, a life that is righteous, a life that is peaceable, a life that is godly. Grace means man living in the nature of God. Once all these are lacking, then you have not yet received grace. Beloved, don't be deceived that you are in the era of grace, that God no longer judges sin. God sees judge sin. Present your heart, present your lips, present your comportment, everything to be holy and acceptable unto Him. If we have truly received grace, we will overcome the worldly loss. We will overcome the ideology of men. I pray that the Lord will help us, that we will truly begin to live in this grace that we have received.